Hi folks, it's Bob at Mountain Crest Farm. Today we're going to do something in the kitchen and outside that y'all may have not, probably haven't ever done before. Have you ever had smoked meatloaf? Well, today we're going to smoke a meatloaf on the Oklahoma Joe Highland smoker. Y'all hang around and see how we're doing it. Okay folks, before you can smoke meatloaf, you've got to do a little bit of prep ahead of time. You're going to need some butter. You're going to need an onion. You're going to need some mushrooms. I like to use two different kinds of mushrooms. And you're going to need some ground beef. Now, ground pork would also be nice. When I do a meatloaf, I like to do 25% ground pork, 25 and 75% ground beef. However, since I'm smoking this, not baking this, this is going to be straight ground beef. Oh, you also need 1 egg. Now, let's get to working on this. All right, folks, you're going to need butter. Go ahead and put it in your pan. This may be enough butter, and I may have to put some more butter in it. Of course, more butter never hurt anything. Mushrooms. I'm going to sit here and take the stems out, but I'm not going to waste them. Stems are good. You just have to cut them up separately. I'm using baby bellas, that's the brown ones, and I'm using just plain old button mushrooms. I wanted to use baby bellas and shiitakes, but the store didn't have any shiitakes today, and I always like to buy my mushrooms fresh, so wound up with baby bellas and button mushrooms instead of baby bellas and shiitakes. It'll still be good. Just rough chop your mushrooms because they're going to cook down and be pretty small. Better be pretty small. My stepdaughter thinks that she doesn't like mushrooms, and if it's big enough pieces to tell it's mushrooms, she'll say, "Ew, I don't like it," when really she does. I've snuck some mushrooms into so much stuff that she eats and she didn't know it. Not even funny. But just rough pieces. If I were doing this for me and Cindy, those slices are about as small as these pieces would have gotten. Because we like mushrooms and we know it. Big old chunks of mushroom in this would be awesome. But I tell Sarah quite often, this ain't Burger King, you don't get it your way. And tell her it's not a restaurant, you don't order what you want. But I do cater to her food tastes more than she knows. Just trying to get it so that when she's 19 years old, but trying to get it that as she matures and as her food tastes mature, she won't be one of these that's 40 years old and won't eat anything that's any good. My first wife had a roommate before we got married that wouldn't eat a steak anyway except for well done. And we used to throw grill out parties on a regular basis, and I used to buy whole New York strips, and so whenever we'd grill out it would be New York strips. And finally one day I told Kate, that's my ex-wife, I said, next time you go to the store, just get a cheap hunk of sirloin. She said, why? I said, because we're having a cookout this weekend, and your ex-roommate's going to be there, and she won't eat a steak that's not well done, and I'm tired of ruining good meat like a New York strip by cooking it well done for her. If she's going to get ruined meat, it's going to be a cheap hunk of sirloin or bottom round. It's going to be something that doesn't cost a lot, and it's going to be something that tastes like crap anyway, because if she's going to ruin it or have me ruin it on the grill, I'm not going to have it breaking my heart to ruin good meat cooking it well done. Just not going to happen. So my wife went and got cheap meat. Her ex-roommate was happy. She didn't complain that I didn't cook it enough, because, oh boy, did I ever cook it enough. How did I get started on that? Anyway, mushrooms into the pan. Now, you think I must be going to do a big meatloaf. Well, I'm going to do about 3.5 pounds. But all those mushrooms are going to cook down, don't forget. It's not going to look like near as much mushrooms when it's done. It's doing a pretty good job, but it could be better. I think it's time I sharpened the knives. I hate using a dull knife. A dull knife will cut you, or it'll get you cut. You'll be the one doing the cutting, but with a dull knife, you're fighting the knife, because it's not just sliding through whatever it is you're cutting. And when you have to fight the knife, you're going to wind up getting cut. A nice sharp knife, it goes where you point it, slides right through what you're cutting, and you won't get hurt. This one's in pretty good shape, but it could still use some work. Onions into the pan. Okay, turn those on about medium heat, and let's cook them down. Okay, starting to cook down. Oh, look at that butter down in there. Butter makes everything awesome. Well, not everything. I don't think there's enough butter in the world to make liver good. But, other than liver, butter makes everything awesome. Let's finish cooking this down. And then we're going to have to let it cool, mix it in with the ground beef, and then go to stage 2. Okay, folks, what we have here is 3.5 pounds of ground beef and 1 egg. That's all that's in here. Here's the mushrooms and onions that a minute ago I was sauteing down. Add them. Actually, it was more than a minute ago. I let them cool. Add them in. Oh, isn't that a bunch of goodness going in there? Onions, mushrooms, butter. Butter. Makes everything wonderful. Once you've got that in there, start working it in. You want it worked all the way through, worked in real good. So keep going until you don't see any mushrooms and onions in one spot. They're just mixed all the way through. Now there's going to be a couple of extra things I do here. I didn't tell you about the barbecue sauce. There's going to be a little bit of barbecue sauce added here. And I didn't tell you about the breadcrumbs, which is not going to be breadcrumbs today. You can use breadcrumbs, you can make your own breadcrumbs. I'll do another video one of these days about making your own breadcrumbs instead of paying a fortune at the store. Right. Now, we have something else that goes with it. And we've got prosciutto. You can use plain ham. I almost used plain ham today because the store didn't have any prosciutto. And then, at least that's what one of the people told me. And then as it turned out, they did have some prosciutto. So, now you'll see some, not mine, you will see some smoked meatloaf recipes that cover the entire meatloaf with prosciutto. And that would probably be really good if it was a baked meatloaf. But this is not going to be a baked meatloaf. This is going to be a smoked meatloaf. Why do you smoke meat? You smoke meat because the smoke adds flavor. If you cover the entire meatloaf with prosciutto or ham, smoke can't get to it, can it? So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this into strips, and then we're going to cover part of the meatloaf with prosciutto instead of all of it. Enough that the prosciutto is going to add some really good flavor, and enough that, but on there light enough that the smoke flavor is going to get to the meatloaf. Otherwise, why smoke it? So, cut you some strips of prosciutto or ham or whatever you're using, and put them on the meatloaf. Kind of, sort of random. But you want to cover about the same amount that you leave uncovered. So, put some strips on running one way, with a little gap in between them. Put some strips on the other way, leaving a little gap in between them. Kind of like putting a crust on top of an apple pie. After you've got that done, you want to put a very thin layer of barbecue sauce. Now, I like making my own barbecue sauce. I like making it with mangoes, things like that. But for this, I'm going to use a store-bought barbecue sauce. And the only barbecue sauce that we use in this house that's store-bought, Sweet Baby Ray's. Just a little bit on there. And then brush it around. And the reason you're going so thin on the barbecue sauce is, again, we're not making barbecued meatloaf, we're making smoked meatloaf, and you want the smoke flavor to make it through. Same reason that the prosciutto doesn't cover the entire thing. So that's got it ready for the smoke. Now, I'm going to stick this in the oven, bake it at 350 for, no, I'm just kidding, folks. This is not a baked meatloaf. This is going in the oven to protect it from the dogs while I go get the smoker ready. So, I'll meet y'all out there at the smoker. How's that? Okay, I'm setting the smoker up just a little bit different than I would for pork butt or brisket or ribs. Usually I keep the smokestack there completely closed, do all the heat control at the other end. But I'm going to have it cracked open just a little bit. And the reason is, on smoked meatloaf, I'm going to be going considerably higher in temperature. Instead of smoking at 220, which is normal, I'm going to be smoking at about 275 to 300. And instead of having the other end completely closed and that open about that much, I'm probably going to be running about like this, and the other end is going to be open a little bit more. Now that sounds counterintuitive. You would think that means the heat's going to blast on through and not stay in the smoker. Well, if my heat starts dropping, I can close the damper on top of the smokestack. But sucking more air in across those coals is going to make them hotter. And that's what I'm hoping is going to happen here. So let's get some fire going here. I would say the newsprint in the bottom of the chimney is going. We got some smoke coming up, and I'll be back when this charcoal gets about ready to take out of the chimney and put in the firebox. Okay, looks like the charcoal is starting to show white up on top in that chimney, so it's time to dump it and go to the next step. So now we're going to put a little bit of hickory on this. Right here, let's get a couple of chunks of hickory. Put on that. And close this up for now and let the heat be building. We'll be back. Smoking meatloaf on the Oklahoma Joe's Highland. Okay, folks. Looks like we're about at 275. Well, we're 273. That's close enough. Let's get this meatloaf on. I'm getting hungry talking about it. So let's get this meatloaf on. Stick it right there. And stick this probe in it. We're looking for 165 degrees internal temperature. Now, remember, we're not trying to smoke this thing tender. We're not going for 200, 203 like I would if I was smoking a pork butt or a brisket. We're just trying to smoke it done. We're trying to balance is what we're trying to do. We are wanting it in there long enough to pick up the smoke flavor. Otherwise, if you just cook it at 300, 350 degrees for an hour and a half, all you've got is a meatloaf. You don't have a smoked meatloaf. You need it in there long enough to pick up the smoke flavor, but there's no need in having it in there long enough to do the low and slow to tenderize it. So I shoot for 275 degrees in that area, and instead of an hour and a half, which is what it would be in the oven at 350, it's probably going to be about 2.5 hours. But it's worth the wait. Well, we were looking for 165 degrees internal temperature. I've been letting it cool down. I was cooking at about 275. We're down to 221. But the internal temperature on the meat is 165. That is exactly what I was looking for. So, I guess it's about time to pull the meat off. This is going to be so good. Are y'all ready for the big reveal? Let's see what this bad boy looks like. Let's see some smoked meatloaf. Oh my, would you look at that? Just like burnt ends when you do a brisket. That's that prosciutto. Oh, that's looking so good. Let's get this probe out of here. Let's get this bad boy in the house, cut into it, and see just how awesome it is. Okay, it's rested for a few minutes. It's about time for dinner, but I have got to see how this is going to taste. Oh, look at that smoke ring on it. God, that looks like brisket. Oh, let's see. Let's see how this tastes. Folks, it's not smoked brisket, but it's just as good, just different. Y'all gonna have to try this. Smoked meatloaf on an Oklahoma Joe Highland smoker. This stuff's awesome. See y'all next video. I'm gonna eat this and some mashed potatoes.